I think that it's important to understand that it is okay to grieve and realize like that's a loss. Like we're grieving all of what we could have done, how we used to walk, how we used to exercise, all of those things are things that we need to be able to say goodbye to, but be able to then look at, okay, well, I can't do that, but I can do this, and working on that acceptance.
But also we have to remember the baby boomers experienced institutionalization,
Yeah.
right? Where like if you even had like a minute amount of mental health issues, they're going to send you away to this place where you live forever.
Yeah.
And these young kids have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
Welcome again to another exciting edition of Talking Retirement. Now, a lot of times we talk about how our physical health changes as the years go on. We might not be as athletic, we might have some issues with our health, but we rarely talk about the side effects and the progression of mental health through your life. So we have two unbelievably talented ladies to talk to us today. Joining us from the psychotherapy practice in Westchester, Pennsylvania, please welcome Elisha Farley and Alana Higgins from A&E Wellness. We're going to be talking about all things mental health for you as you age and through your senior years. Thanks so much for coming on, guys. How you doing?
Good, thanks.
All right, awesome. So before we get started, I know we have a couple questions that we're going to run through. How did the two of you meet? How did you create A&E Wellness? You know, what's your experience? Would love to hear a little bit about your background before we get into it.
I'll let you take it.
Oh, you're gonna, okay.
Yeah.
So Alana and I worked at a local community behavioral health program in Chester County, and we met there, and we had similar views and similar wants out of mental health treatment, and ended up starting our private practice together.
I think that was
Awesome.
in 2019.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So that's so cool to see. And what exactly, you know, your belief systems, you mentioned that you guys have the same belief system as it pertains to mental health. What are some of the key beliefs between the two of you that draw the two of you together and, you know, created this practice?
Yeah, so one of our core beliefs is that mental health should be accessible. We were running into issues. There was so much bureaucracy when it comes to community mental health. And I definitely understand the need for that because when you're in that level of care, you're seeing people with probably the most severe versions of mental health conditions. And so there should be oversight. But I do feel like there was so much that it was hard to actually see change and see people get better. And so one of our core beliefs was accessibility. And if somebody's insurance or copay or deductible is egregious, we're willing to work with them on that to make sure that it's something that they can do, because we do see the impact of what mental health has on all aspects of people's lives.
Yeah, that's incredibly noble. I know in my experience, when I was first looking into mental health, I was living in New York at the time. And when I went to talk to a psychologist, they all said, no insurance, $1,000 up front. And it's just crazy that so many people have to deal with such a thing because mental health is so paramount to not only, you know, living a nice, healthy life, but also your physical health as well. You know, what are some different symptoms and conditions that may show up in somebody if their mental health isn't quite where they want it to be?
It can be different for everybody, you know, but the major ones that are noticeable are insomnia. It can affect sleep, motivation, and the desire to even do things that we once enjoyed. It can come in physical ailments. It can be aches and pains, especially as we get older. It can be stomach issues too.
Weight gain or loss.
Yeah.
It is crazy how these mental things can cut into physical health in such a way. But obviously, this is Talking Retirement. This is a podcast primarily for seniors and people in their middle ages. And the things that we talked about ahead of time were, how does your mental health change as you get older? So if you were to give a couple general trends as you start to approach your 50s, 60s, 70s, you know, your later years, what are some changes that you start to see with people's mental health? You know, it doesn't have to be for everybody. Obviously, everybody's different, but just some general patterns and things people should look out for.
Yeah, so, you know, in working with some of our current clients that are in that kind of generation, a conversation that tends to come up for me a lot is a shift in the focus of, like, what's my legacy? Like, what are people going to remember me for? Is that good or bad? And then also, like, the increase in caretaking stress And it's not just like caretaking for like older parents, but we do know that like the younger generations, the 20s, like they're staying home longer. So you're still in this caretaking role, but it's a different caretaking role. And so whatever that stress is, you know, so those are two big areas that I have found to be conversation pieces.
I would add that sometimes the changes in social dynamics with loss of friends and family also increase some feelings of loneliness, which can be an increased symptom for someone experiencing depression as they age as well. So the issues with feelings of loneliness, as well as kind of thinking about end of life things. So as they age, as we start to get older, we start to think about like, okay, now I'm closer to the end of my life rather than the start or the middle of my life. And sometimes that starts to come up in these existential type of thinking of what does that mean?
It's almost like you're confronted with your mortality as your friends and family start to pass away, and you start to go, oh, this is actually happening. I'm not invincible. We obviously all have health scares, but it's like, no, this is just naturally going to happen soon, right?
Yeah. Well, and also when you think about retirement, you kind of lose that built-in like social time. And so I know a conversation I have with people that are looking towards retirement, I usually suggest find hobbies and things now, because when retirement happens, it does create that huge void of having nothing social in your life. So
yeah, I mean, you go from working 40, 50 hours a week, you know, we're talking not only the time of working, but you're also the commute, the getting ready, the coming back. It's really most of your time goes to working, and all of a sudden you get rid of that void. There's this huge void, and you're like, what do I do with my time? And I know at least with my clients, they always like to talk about golfing or playing bridge or that kind of thing. What are some hobbies or activities that you recommend to your clients as they make this transition? Are there any in particular that you guys really like to recommend?
So I'm going to use the joke of what happened with my in-laws. So my mother-in-law was is a stay-at-home mom, and then my father-in-law was working. And so she tried to force upon him learning how to fly fish for his retirement plan. So she bought him all this gear, and he went once for a lesson. And he's like, oh my God, this is terrible. It was like,
can you even fly fish around here? Like, are they in Pennsylvania? Like,
yeah, they do. I mean, they're in the Poconos, but they do.
Okay.
It was like so interesting to me that she's trying to force on him hobbies, and it's like, give him the chance.
Which I think feeds into it is, you know, we don't make suggestions so much. It's really an individual desire, need, you know, and need. Start exploring. What did you like? What do you like? What is the thing that you one day said, oh, I'd really like to explore this one day? You know, a lot of people call it a bucket list. I go, it's a one day I would like to. So start exploring the things that you always said, hey, when I have the time, I'd like to try this. Yeah. And start weeding it out and start exploring what is it that you do enjoy and don't enjoy. Just don't rule anything out and start building those connections and hobbies and interests, and start taking classes, just whatever. But
or travel,
yep.
Yeah, I know that like the stereotypical thing is, oh, volunteer, and that's very noble, but like if volunteerism wasn't something that you thought of in your young adulthood, I don't know why it would be something you think of in your retirement. Right.
It's like, it's not something I thought would be fun when I was working, but now it's, you know, I did actually.
So I agree. You got to lean on what you thought at one point would have been really fun to do. Right. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know my dad, for instance, he like never took vacations with us when he was working, and he actually was able to cash in his vacation days at the end of his time working for the state. And I think he had like 4 months of vacation days built up or something like that. But he's taken that money and since traveled. So he's lucky enough to have that. So something we talked about a few minutes ago, I love all those points, but you know, on top of not only finding hobbies and all those things, you know, there's only so much time you can fill with hobbies. It's not like you can play bridge or play golf every day. There's still, I think, a pretty big void in terms of what you have available to you time-wise. If people do start to get sad or they do start to feel empty or lonely in these retirement years, what are some coping strategies other than hobbies that you guys like to recommend or would like to tell people? Because obviously we can say, oh, just go hobbies, but there could be more mental things going on, right? Like even if you are filling up the time, there could be this loss of purpose. And what do you do to kind of help fill that mental gap?
Well, the one thing that I usually always suggest, and it doesn't matter how old you are, I always suggest exercise. And whatever exercise or activity looks like for you, it's so important to mental health. There's such a connection to building those endorphins and giving yourself that ability, that little leg up. Like we all need a little help, and exercise or activity really helps. I say activity because not a lot of people love exercise, but if like you like nature walking, go on a nature walk, you know. So it's really broad.
It absolutely is filling that time with routine and structure and exercise and healthy daily habits, even making sure that you're eating appropriately and making sure you're getting enough quality sleep and following up with doctor's appointments and all of that kind of stuff is all crucial. And Alana said, exercise looks different. It's really just activity, just making sure that we stay mobile to whatever our level is, because that does change over lifetime, and we'd be like, well, I used to run 5 miles a day. I'm not doing anything but running. Well, that changes, and we can't always do that to find something that fits into that day. And if that's a chair exercise, then do a chair exercise. If that's walking up and down the driveway, it's walking up and down the driveway. All of them have health benefits, and also it helps with the endorphins and the chemicals in the brain, no matter what we do.
Yeah, I know. Like you guys are saying, you don't have to be a CrossFit athlete at 75 or anything like that. You can just stay active. Yeah. I know we have this one guy outside our office, and I always drive by him because he's doing it right as I'm going into the office. But older guy, probably in his 70s, and he always just goes for a walk with 2 5-pound weights in his hand, and he's always doing it every single day. And he's pretty built. I mean, he's old, but he's got some muscles. And there's another guy who, around the same time, he's a little bit further up the road, Davenport. And he just cleans up roads. That's his way of staying active. He takes a garbage bag and a pick, and he just cleans up the roads. And I'm like, what a cool way to stay active and, feel valued. But I kind of want to play on what you guys just said. A lot of this is about transitions, lack of work, lack of, family responsibility, those kind of things. We talked about, obviously, your physical health changes, and you might not be as active as you used to be. How do you deal with that physical transition? Obviously, sometimes people can't not only be as athletic as they want to be, but they also might potentially not be able to be athletic at all. You might have a hip issue, a knee issue, you might lose your mobility, you might become disabled. How do you deal with something as dramatic as that? What are some mental tips to help you through that?
Well, I'm going to pull from the DBT world a little bit. So DBT is a type of therapy similar to CBT. So there's a term called radical acceptance. And so that is something that if this is a client of mine, which I've had these types of clients, we would be talking about that. And radical acceptance is not accepting that, like, oh my gosh, now I'm like disabled, my life's over, but accepting that this is where you're at, and then being able to like move forward with what you're capable of now. Not looking back at yourself from 2-3 years ago and being like, but I used to be able to do that. Right. It's radically accepting this is what life is right now.
Absolutely. And in layman's terms, is looking at what you can rather than what you can't. Yeah. Looking at what you can do now as opposed to what you used to be able to do 10 years ago.
And maybe that includes finding connections with people that have similar issues. Like if like you do have a physical ailment that's preventing you from becoming more active or getting involved with things that you used to, the World Wide Web is so fantastic. Like you can find an online group that like you can join, or an online group can turn into an in-person group that you all can meet up. So I feel like there's definitely options that like make loneliness and feeling like you're the only person dealing with this less intense.
Right.
Absolutely. Those are great points. Sorry, go ahead, Elisha.
I think that it's important to understand that it is okay to grieve what our abilities and what we used to be able to do, and realize like that's a loss. Like we're grieving all of what we could have done, how we used to walk, how we used to exercise. All of those things are things that we need to be able to say goodbye to, but be able to then look at, okay, well, I can't do that, but I can do this, and working on that acceptance. But they can go hand in hand, grieving and accepting at the same time.
like you can feel the loss and rightfully mourn, but also say, I still have to move forward. You can accept both. You don't have to push it down and just say, all right, you know, this is my life, but I'm never going to focus on the past. It's like focusing on both sides of it.
Because, you know, that's where you hear of those terms of grumpy old man or, you know, all these like mean old people. It's because they've built up that resentment about the past life and not accepted where they're at now, you know? So those terms are real.
Yeah, like the old curmudgeon. Like,
But it's kind of funny that you say that. In addition, some of that is when you're talking about recognizing depression in older adults, sometimes that's a sign of it that, you know, because Gen X didn't talk about depression and mental health, it wasn't a part of their world, that it manifests in this anger and resentment and this just the curmudgeon, right? Because it's all internalized. So, you know, one of the ways and one of the things that we can encourage everyone to do is talk about it. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to feel angry and upset and frustrated and, you know, mourn all of these things, and it doesn't need to be hidden. It's okay to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue to another point I wanted to bring up. Now, I don't want this to be one of those articles where it's like millennials kill the economy or baby boomers kill the economy. Like, I hate all that whole pitting generations against each other. But in your experience, again, everybody's different. What are some generalities you see between baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, you know, whatever it may be, and how they, you know, like what are their mental health general issues? How do they approach it? Are they more open or less open depending on the age? Like, you know, we can start with baby boomers and kind of work our way down. But, you know, when you see these people that are like, let's say 55 and over in 2023, what are some mental health things that you see manifest frequently?
Well, I will say there's more resistance to being open. So building that rapport and building their trust takes a lot more work. But it's because, you know, they were always told that's your business. You don't share your business with other people. You just deal with it or you just stuff it down. And so like having to rewire their brain to be like, it's okay. You can trust certain people with this. They can't blab it out. Like they're confidential. There's confidentiality laws here. And so it's really hard to build the rapport. But once you do, it's like amazing because it's it's this amazing experience of like hearing what they've experienced, all the times in their lives where they're like, man, I wish I had had therapy then because I'm sure this wouldn't have happened later. And I'm like, yeah, but like we're here now. So like we got to work up now.
I would agree. When you look at, you know, the manifestation of mental health, it doesn't see any age differences. Mental health happens. It can increase as we get older just because we're dealing with more like loss, more changes, more medical issues. And that's needless to say, like, could it have been there before or later? I mean, that's a whole other debate, but the issues are all the same. The manifestations can be different across the lifespan for everyone, but no two people look alike regardless of age. You know, when you're dealing with that. And in addition, I think adding to what Elena already said is, you know, the educational piece. You know, mental health was a more taboo with Generation X and the baby boomers than it is now. It's very much talked about. The kids know it, you know, especially our high school kids. They talk about their therapist. So who is your therapist? How often do you go? They are just more educated, more open, that it's okay not to be okay.
Part of life. It's like you go to soccer practice, you go to therapy. But also we have to remember the baby boomers experienced institutionalization, right? Where like if you even had like a minute amount of mental health issues, they're going to send you away to this place where you live forever. And these young kids have no idea what that is. Yeah.
It's something I never would have thought of now that you brought it up. I obviously knew institutionalization existed and it was a thing, but you never would think, oh, I literally have to hide my mental health issues because I literally might get thrown away and they're going to lock away the key. And I always thought, you know, it was more of a generational thing where it was just push it down, deal with it, work hard. You know, it's kind of that cliche baby boomer ethos. I never would have thought that you're literally protecting yourself from being basically thrown in jail. It's a crazy thought to think of.
Yeah.
It's like, no
know.
wonder they don't want to open up.
Right, because that's what their fear is. Like, I'm going to tell you this, and then you're going to send me to the crazy house. And it's like, those don't even exist anymore.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting because in popular media today, there are a lot of shows that explore mental health in both positive and negative lights, and I think a more realistic approach. Some off the top of my head, like I can think of Ted Lasso. I know there was that big show, 13 Reasons Why, you know, and some are toxic, some are not. But I think in media, at least, there was this idea of like a shrink, and going to the psychologist was this super dramatic thing where like everything was like a huge breakthrough, and it was very dramatic when you're watching it on like TV or in a movie. But real life, like most therapy is pretty routine. You're not crying every time you show up to the therapy session.
Yeah. And I will say that, I don't know if you saw the show Shrink, that one was really good.
Oh, Shrinking. Is this the one on Apple TV, Shrinking?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Me and my
good.
girlfriend love it. It's awesome.
But we're talking about like the media. I have a love-hate relationship with social media. I love it because it's actually destigmatizing a lot of mental health issues. I hate it because it's putting out information that is maybe not correct or is correct, but making a lot of people think they have certain diagnoses or conditions that they don't have.
Right.
And so it's like we have to work a little harder to educate our clients on like, you don't actually have borderline personality disorder because you have 1, 2, 3. Like, you just happen to have those things. It doesn't mean you're this.
or throwing around terms that everybody's a narcissist and toxic and things like that, which is very beneficial to understand negative things to be looking for. But I think a lot of the social media is labeling, and I think that that's also a really difficult thing for older adults to think about too, is like not wanting a label, where I think in the younger generation they're searching sometimes for a label, and that's unhealthy in and of itself. But the older generations don't want a label. I'm fine, I'm okay, I don't have anything wrong with me. And mental health isn't something wrong with us. It's just like any other medical issue that we all are dealing with and have to manage in our life, and looking at this as managing our health as a whole. And our mental health is just as big a part of our body as our arms and our legs and our heart and our lungs. We need to take care of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so funny because there was this period where all these quizzes would come out, and they'd be like, 10 questions, and we'll tell you what your mental health diagnosis is. And they'll be like, you have all 3 dark triad, narcissistic personality disorders. And you're like, oh, I guess I'm a sociopath. Like,
oh my God. I did one of those, and I was like, how do I have that? Like, I forget what it was, but like, that makes no sense to me.
Yeah. And I think there's just so much misinformation out there. I know for me personally, a lot of the content out there is like, you don't need antidepressants, you don't need anti-anxiety, you don't need therapy, you just need to eat vegetables, you need to get good sleep. And then like, I started taking antidepressants, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I should have taken this like 6 years ago. Like, it helps me do all the good things. Yeah.
It's where there's the pros and the cons. We have to be mindful of the information we receive and where we receive it. And the thing is I can find anything that I want information for. I can back up any one of my thoughts by getting information.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't mean that that information is accurate. And I think that can also be scary for a lot of people, like getting the accurate information and being well informed rather than just informed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think this is kind of a good segue. We were talking about approaching mental health and getting to just open up a little bit with people in their older ages. Say I'm a hypothetical 65-year-old man. I've never taken care of my mental health. I'm at that old curmudgeon status. What do you say to this person to say, hey, you don't have to open up right away, but you should take your mental health a little more seriously? If you're having that conversation directly with them, whether you're trying to get them to go to therapy or you're like a family member, what are some key points you would want people to resonate with in terms of, approaching that therapy journey, approaching that mental health journey?
Well, I'm going to share a personal experience. My grandma is now 93, but when she was 91, we started to notice early dementia symptoms and just like this period of depression coming from that because she was having difficulty remembering things. And I, for years, had suggested, you should just have a therapist, somebody to just help you, work through these things because it's hard. And she was so resistant, 92 years old, 93 now. Like,
Yeah, can't tell me nothing. Just
yeah,
like, no.
I don't know this person. They don't need to know my life. And the only way that she would agree was if, like me, or if, it could have been somebody else, but I was there, went with her to her first appointment. So sometimes it does take offering, hey, I'll go with you the first time or the second time. If it helps you get there and it makes you feel more comfortable talking to a stranger, sometimes it just really helps to have that person that isn't going to judge you for that and just go with you.
I think also allowing it to just take time. Like, we recognize therapy is uncomfortable for everybody. Walking into a stranger's office and being expected to just open up and tell them everything is a really scary situation. So being able to be mindful that that's scary and uncomfortable for everyone, and being allowing for it to take time, allowing for rapport and comfort to develop. So someone coming in for the first time, just saying to them, hey, like, we know that this is hard. Well, you walked through the front door and that was the first big step, and that's amazing that you did it. Even making the phone call sometimes or emails is something that we often reply back saying, hey, thanks for reaching out. I'm glad that you did that. That's really hard to do. And encouraging them to just keep coming back. It takes some time to feel comfortable and make it a safe space.
And I will say the other piece that, in my education, they always said, don't ever start saying, tell me about your life. Because what a loaded balloon that is, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my Lord. You just say, hey, what's happening right now? Like, can I help you with any suggestions? Like, what's happening?
Yep.
If you start here and now, they learn to trust you that, like, oh, we don't need to talk about, like, when I was 10? Okay, cool.
When you talk about the old perceptions, like Ken, when you were saying, like, the strength and the perception, like, you lay on the couch, you come in and be like, okay, tell me about when you were 3 years old. Like, that is really scary. That's not the way it is. You start, what is happening right now.
Yep.
If the past comes up, if you end up going there, you go there, but that's not the first time. That's not
even
where
like
it
the
is.
first month.
No.
Like,
no.
Yeah. It's like, make your top 10 biggest traumatic moments of your life right off the bat,
just list it out. It'll be great.
Yeah. Thanks to both of you for, sharing some pretty personal stories. Alana, I want to piggyback off what you just said with your dementia. Thank you for bringing that up. Something I think I see a lot, because we have a lot of clients that are, mid 60s, which means they are in many cases taking care of their parents or their grandparents who are in their 80s and 90s. And it could be dementia, it could be general disability. But I think something not a lot of people focus on is your mental health when you are a caregiver. And I have seen so many people spiral into very bad mental and physical states because they refuse to take care of themselves while they are being a caregiver for somebody else. How do you, when you're a caregiver, establish boundaries with your caregiving? What are some key factors and things you want to do to tell a caregiver, hey, you also have to take care of yourself, even though you're taking care of this person who literally can't take care of themselves?
Well, I think you said part of it. You have to set boundaries. Just because you're a caregiver doesn't mean that you're the 24/7 caregiver, right? So you have to know what your limits are.
Yes.
If you really only have the mental capacity to be that caregiver for 4 hours, acknowledge that, accept that, and seek out the help that you need to fill the gap. Because yes, you want to help this person, but you're not actually helping them or yourself. Right. Like, it is known by that person being cared for that, like, you're resentful, that, like, you dislike them right now because they took over your whole life. So you really have to be honest with yourself. What are you capable of in this situation? And if you're not capable of being a caretaker, don't feel guilty about that. Some people just can't, and that's okay, It's just being able to accept that and not feeling like guilty and being roped into something that, like, you truly cannot do. That's part of it.
I think Elena summed it all up, but the most important thing is we can't be a caretaker or take care of someone else if we can't take care of ourselves. and realizing that when we don't prioritize ourselves, it does impact everyone else. It impacts every other role. So caretakers are typically in the caretaking role. They may still be parents and parenting their own children. They might be community involved individuals. They might be still employed for themselves. They probably have a partner or friends or additional family. It impacts every role if they don't take care of themselves. So the need to really prioritize, set boundaries, understand their own needs, what they can and cannot do, and make their own health important just as much as everyone else that they are caretaking for, because not just the sick individuals. They probably play a caretaking role in many lives, and making that important. Because again, the saying is if you're not okay, then you're like everyone else is not okay, and that's just doing an injustice for themselves and everyone else, and kind of going against the point. Like, I want to be a good caretaker, and by not taking care of myself, I can't be a good caretaker. Kind of makes no sense.
And like, therapy is so accessible now that it's not like, oh my gosh, I can't set aside 2 hours to drive somewhere, have a session, come back. Like, who's going to take care of my person over here? It's so accessible now that, like, you can say, hey, can you just sit and watch TV for an hour? And if you need me, buzz me. Like, you got the buzzer thing. I'm going to go be in my room having this session. It's so great that this is something that we can offer people that are in caretaking roles that felt like before they were a prison of the house they were in, and they couldn't really take care of themselves.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, they're great points. I love that you're bringing up the accessibility point, but kind of to the whole social media point of there's pros and cons to, this accessibility. I know from my own experience before I was lucky enough to meet Elisha that there are a lot of, I want to say, shady is a strong word, less than ideal services. I was dealing with one. It's a big, national one. I'm not going to say the name just because I don't want like a defamation lawsuit, but it was basically not through insurance. You paid a flat fee. Every single influencer is running the same ad of like, I had to focus on my mental health. And I ended up having like a very bad therapist. So I guess this kind of segues into, how do you find the right therapy system for you? And then how do you find the right therapist? Because I find sometimes you have to go through a couple before you find the one that clicks for you. And there's honestly nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's it. Like, so as therapists, we also seek out therapy, right? Because we hear a lot, and there's a lot of it for us to process, and it's a lot to have to keep in, right?
Yeah.
I have been through 3 therapists to find the right fit, right? So you're right. It takes time, and it is a burden to find that right fit, but it is so worth it when it happens, So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It does take some trial and error, which can be really frustrating, but once you find that person that you connect with and you feel comfortable with, it is very much worth the journey of getting there. So I think that just encouraging everybody to stick with it. If one service doesn't work or one therapist doesn't work, then just try another one.
Or like one way of doing therapy doesn't work. Like, I had a client that they thought they did really great with in-person therapy. And for a year we did that. And then they transitioned to telehealth because they moved. They did so much better and they made so much more progress. So like, sometimes you aren't using the therapy in the right way that works for you, right? So I think it's just a matter of testing it out. Like, do you do better with texting? Do you do better with phone, video, in person? There's so many different ways,
And to not be discouraged when, maybe you put yourself on the line, you really try to do your best, you really put yourself out there. And maybe, like you said, the therapy style or the therapist isn't a right fit. It doesn't mean it's not right for you. It just means you need to find the thing that clicks for you.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And like, I think that speaks to you are continuously putting yourself in a vulnerable position that is very uncomfortable, and we don't typically do. And so it's like being okay with being uncomfortable many different times until it hits.
Absolutely. I like that. Like, just keep being uncomfortable. It's always gonna be a little uncomfortable, but it kind of helps you out in the long run.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we talked about retiring. We talked about caregiving. Something I wanted to talk about, because I see it quite a bit, is widowing, losing family and friends, sometimes in succession. What do you recommend as far as like a grieving process for people as they're going through this gauntlet of family and friends, and like their mortality is starting to show itself a little bit more? What are some keys to help people as they approach those years where it's happening a little more frequently than you would like?
I think just letting yourself go through it. You know, there is no right or wrong way to grieve. Everybody does it individually, and allowing yourself to have that support, talk, communicate, find the resources, find support groups, find people that are in similar situations, not being afraid to talk about the feelings, not being afraid of the feelings, right? And those feelings of loss can increase also feelings of loneliness. So you're now, you know, adding to the things that we're feeling that we view as negative feelings, and allowing ourselves to feel them. I think we're very much afraid of negative feelings, but negative feelings are a part of life. They coexist with positive ones, and we need to be able to experience them both and be okay with experiencing them both. So allow yourself to go through the process.
That I'm going to piggyback off of that, where we always tell people, don't isolate yourself. Like, don't stay in your house all day. You need to get out. But I'm actually okay when you are freshly into the grieving process. Please do that. Like, if that's what your brain is telling you need, you need it. Because if you don't do it, you're just prolonging the inevitable, and you're going to have a breakdown later on, and it's going to be even uglier than it is now. So you got to listen to your body when it says it needs this time alone.
Absolutely. I will share one of my bad words is the shoulds.
The shoulds.
Yeah. I'm like, you just said a bad word. Should, like that. I shouldn't be feeling this. I should be okay already. I shouldn't be at this point. Like, you are where you're at, you know, and I agree with Elena. Like, there is time where it's appropriate to be alone and allow ourselves to be alone, allow ourselves to be in that grief and to cry and to be alone, but to add in and to still connect, to know that balance, you know, and feel comfortable with that, because complete isolation isn't okay and complete avoidance isn't okay.
Got to find the happy medium where you can touch both bases, basically.
If you are grieving and you are in a caretaking role of somebody who is maybe on hospice, hospice is such a great resource. They don't just leave you when the person dies. You have access to a grief therapist for a year or more. So, like, they're with you way past somebody's death, and they check in on you. So if you're not checking in with friends, at least there's somebody checking in to check on you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I know from our experience, we've talked to a couple different hospice providers, and we are always floored by the work that they do. They really care about their jobs. They really go all out, and it's really good to not only comfort the person who is passing away, but their family, because, you know, they're the ones that are getting hit the hardest by this, and it's not going to be something that's, you know, brushed over in a day.
Right.
So we talked a little bit about opening up and having those conversations and allowing yourself to feel those feelings. But we also earlier talked about how, you know, painting with the big brush here, baby boomers might want to push those feelings down a little bit more naturally. You know, what's the process like for them? You know, obviously, we're painting with the big brush, as we say, but, you know, as you slowly break down that wall, do you think the wall cracks and maybe it flows a little bit more than the average person because there's so much built up? Like, how does that process go for someone who's a little bit older?
I also think it depends on personality type. Like, there are people who are just a little bit more emotionally sensitive, which is actually strength, but because of their generation, they've been told to stifle it. So I find in people that are a little bit more emotionally sensitive, once you get the crack, they're pretty open, right? So they're great to work with because you see it almost immediate progress. People who are not as emotionally sensitive, it takes a lot more time. And when I said it takes more than like a month to get to know your therapist, for those individuals, it's probably going to be 6 months to a year. And hopefully they have the stamina and patience to work through that. But it really can take that long.
Gotcha. So some of them, it's like you crack open the dam and you're like, oh my God, wow, okay, here it is. And sometimes it's more of like a trickle where you're slowly chipping away, hoping for the best.
They'll give you little tidbits.
Absolutely. And again, I think that when you're talking about people in general, this is everybody. You know, I know we're talking a lot about individuals for retirement age and Gen X and baby boomers, but like the reality is we're all human and we all go through this and we all have these experiences, and allowing ourselves to be human. And again, the difference between the older generation and us is that they were told it's not okay.
Yeah.
And kind of accepting that mantra is that it is okay. It is okay to open up. It is okay to talk about it now, even though we were told before that it wasn't, and being okay to unlearn what we have learned. And the saying is, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, yes, you can. You can. Everybody can learn something new.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what everybody thinks, no matter how stubborn you are, you can over time change and, work on your mental health in a great capacity.
Absolutely.
Awesome, guys. Well, this has been such great information. I'm so grateful to have both of you on this podcast to talk all things mental health. If anyone wants to reach out to you, I know you're in the Westchester, Pennsylvania area. Where can they reach you?
They can go to our website, which is aewellness.org. And we are also on Instagram and Facebook. You can catch us there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I will also, for anybody watching, I will link their website, their Instagram, their socials, their phone number, all that stuff in the comments below, just so anyone can have it. But thank you guys so much. I think it's so important. We talked a lot about how a lot of older people may or may not want to open up. So I do hope people listening to this are able to open up a little bit more and, function and, get the mental health care that they need. So thank you guys so much for opening up with this.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to Talking Retirement on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to keep up with the podcast, and check out all the other great educational content we have on the NJ Life and Health YouTube channel. If you'd like to listen to an audio version of the podcast, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much all other major podcasting platforms. For daily senior tips and to keep up with us at NJ Life and Health, follow us on all major social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at NJ Life and Health. And of course, if you'd like someone in your corner to help you with Medicare and life insurance, we would love to talk to you. Visit our website at www.njlifeandhealth.com or call our office in Toms River, New Jersey at 848-226-6897. We'd love to set you up with an appointment with one of our Medicare and life insurance brokers, and we are licensed in a lot of other states besides New Jersey. So no matter where you are, there's a chance we can help you out. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode.